Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to talk about that whole Daemonkin thing, what is happening. And to be honest, it's exciting for a couple of reasons. There were also a bunch of other rumour Demon Engine pictures over the last couple of days, which we will have a look at in a different video, but we're also going to talk in that other video about maybe that's getting a little bit stale now, a little bit long in the tooth. Perhaps something of more substance might be nice. I think teaser images are great up to a point, and then it starts to get a little bit tiresome, but that's a discussion for a different video entirely. Today we're going to talk about Daemonkin. See, there was another trailer for the Shadowspear box in which Daemonkin were specifically mentioned. It said the Daeminkin Arise, and there's a couple of things I like about this, and also quite a big thing that I think it's important to bear in mind, perhaps, when talking about this stuff. So the first thing, and the thing that I'm kind of treating as the primary thing that I'm happy about, is the idea that perhaps Chaos Space Marines are going to become even more visually distinctive than they were before, and we're going to see more in the way of either possession or kind of symbiotic relationships, or the melding of demon and machine to create what I think is a fully distinguished Chaos Space Marine army. Something which has been slowly built towards over the years, but is not quite all the way there yet. See, one of the things I really like about Chaos, or at least liked about Chaos, is the fact that, you know, these are loyalists gone bad. They are traitors, they are heretics. They've abandoned the Imperium, they now fight on behalf of the Chaos Gods. Of course, that means they're going to be using similar or the same equipment as loyalists. In a lore/fluff sense, that makes perfect sense, and it works. You know, they're going to be using the equipment that they had before because that's the equipment they have. You cannot turn traitor and then suddenly expect to have a whole bunch of fancy new stuff to play with. That is the kind of thing that a force will build up over years if they survive years. It makes sense from that point of view. However, from a tabletop perspective, from a model perspective, there's always been a slight issue. Personally, you know, I'm only talking from myself here. I'm not blanket statementing this. This is just how I've felt. I've much appreciated the kind of additional stuff that Chaos Space Marines have to distinguish themselves from their loyalist brethren. See, when I first started playing 40k, going back many, many years now, there was not as much in the way of visually distinctive stuff for Chaos. So I'm talking things like the Hellbrute, obviously Dreadnought replacement, but it is visually distinctive from the Dreadnought. The Defiler came out, I think maybe was it a year after I started playing? I can't remember. But the Defiler was something that was in the Codex for ages but had no model. When that came out, that was a big deal. That was a really big deal because it was so different to anything that Space Marines had access to. You know, as a Chaos Space Marines player, you had Land Raiders, and you had Bikes, and you had Predators, and you had Havocs, and Chaos Space Marine squads, and these were all things that looked very similar to Space Marine stuff, except you could stick spikes on them, and instead of there being an Imperium symbol, there was a Chaos symbol, and that was about it. It wasn't a huge leap visually. If you didn't want that spiky aesthetic, all you had to go by was the paint job. And of course, when you can paint your stuff however you like, be you loyalist or Chaos, that can muddy the waters a little bit. When the Defiler showed up, that was one of those occasions where I was like, oh my god, yes. Yes, it's so distinct, it's so different. It looks nothing like what Space Marines got access to. That, along with the Demon Prince, along with the Terminators that I had at the time, the old lead metal ones, which I still have, they weigh a ton, you could murder someone with those. Those were all things that were so unmistakably Chaos. Admittedly, the Terminators fell into that trap of just having spikes all over, but having like the tusked helmets and stuff did help too. Weapon combinations made a difference, but at a glance, if you didn't go for the spiky aesthetic, it was like, oh cool, Space Marine, oh no wait, Chaos Space Marine, sorry, I missed the Demon Prince in the corner there, everything else looks pretty much the same. Over the years, there has been a really nice separation of what you find in loyalist Space Marine armies and what you find in Chaos Space Marine armies, with the addition of things like, well, the replacement of Dreadnoughts with Hellbrutes, with the addition of Mauler Fiends and Forge Fiends with the Helldrake. We've got things like Possessed and Obliterators, Mutilators. I mean, Obliterators were around back in the day, obviously, but they were a limited choice for armies. if I remember correctly, could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, they had a limit of 0 or 1, so you couldn't have more than 1 unit of obliterators in your army, unless you were playing Iron Warriors, in which case that limit was removed because they've got a special relationship with the obliterator cult. You could do funny things with that if you had enough money to buy a bunch of metal obliterators, which you can only buy 1 of at a time, and obviously you want 3 for a unit, so if you wanted to run 4 units of 3 obliterators, it was possible, because you could sacrifice 2 fast attack slots for a heavy support slot. I only ever met one person who did that, and he never won anything. Well, saying that, neither did I, so it didn't make that much of a difference. But things like that were very much on the lower end of stuff that was separating the two forces. You know, from a glance, they were visually kind of similar. Things have been slowly moving away from that. You know, with the addition of all these demon engines, we actually have a force that is recognisably Space Marine, but also so different from the standard Space Marine forces that it's not really a thing anymore, where you look over and go, oh, they're playing oh no, wait, it is Chaos. There's been a slow change. The embracing of that in terms of things like Daemonkin and in terms of what looks like the newer design aesthetic for Chaos Space Marines, I really like that, because it is showing a further separation. Something I've wanted for ages is more like demonic constructs, things like that, things like the Mauler Fiend, the Forge Fiend, things like the Helldrake. I've wanted to see replacements for things like the Predator and the Land Raider with demonic equivalents for quite a long time, and whilst in a way that does take away some of the aspect of Chaos Space Marines being traitors who have turned from the Imperium, it also does a lot to create more of that visual distinction. Whilst it is nice to see things like Vindicators and Predators and Rhinos, I think it's also nice for an army to be so distinct that you know what it is immediately. If there were things that could be used in place of those that fulfilled a similar function, but had more of a, we've been in the warp for thousands upon thousands of years, that would be kind of nice. I'll always have a soft spot for the old Chaos vehicles. I mean, it's impossible not to. They are part of the equipment that Chaos Space Marines essentially are forced to use because that's what they have. But at the same time, there are multiple questions that kind of come up all the time with stuff like that, whereby things like Land Raiders can be repaired endlessly, apparently, but drop pods can't. Why? You know, there's a bunch of kind of weird, contradictory things that go on with Chaos Space Marines with regards as to why they can't have something that Space Marines have got. And quite often there is also a similar complaint whereby if Space Marines get something, there is a complaint that Chaos Space Marines also get it. I much prefer the method that we seem to be seeing now, where Chaos Space Marines aren't getting what normal Space Marines get. They're getting different stuff that fulfills similar roles. They're getting different weapons that do similar jobs. They're getting different tanks that do similar things to what Space Marines have got. With the introduction of the Primaris line as well, and Chaos now having this big overhaul that we're seeing, we are now getting to the point where they are so completely different visually that there's no possible confusion, and they are also very much look like opposing forces. If Games Workshop actually take the Daemonkin thing seriously and start making it so that there are multiple different units for Chaos Space Marines that have some sort of demonic influence going on, all that's going to do is increase the gap between Chaos Space Marines and Space Marines. And I really like the idea of that. Now the thing is, you could argue, well, what if I want to play a chapter that has only just turned traitor, that doesn't have access to all of this stuff? What if I don't want a bunch of demonic guys running around the battlefield? Well, that's where the wonderful thing of choice comes in. As long as they don't remove the ability to do that, I don't really see the problem. One of the most fun things you can do in 40k is take an army idea and run with it and see if you can make it. I mean, if you got a bunch of Chaos accessories and accessory sprues and vehicle sprues and so on, you could quite easily make a Primaris force that's fallen to Chaos if you really want to, if you want to go full Heretic, which of course everyone does once in a while. It doesn't have to remove that ability. All it does is mean that the base army is even more visually distinctive than it was before, which to me is only a positive, because some of the stuff for Chaos Space Marines has very much just felt like Space Marines with spikes. And to be honest, they can be more exciting than that. They can be more interesting than that if we want them to be. And it looks like Games Workshop has taken it in that direction, which is what I'm excited about. Because the other thing with Daemonkin is that it's not something that is a common phrase. Things like possessed, I expect we will just get phased out or replaced, the name replaced with things like Daemonkin. We now have the Master of Possession. We've got a couple of different Masters of Possession at this point, different named ones anyway. And if the terminology is being changed, Daemonkin makes a lot of sense. The only downside is that Daemonkin is quite easy to be... I think it can be easily confused with the fact we've already had a Khorne Daemonkin army, which is a little bit rough in that this now has an established thing, and Games Workshop are most likely going to use this word to replace possessed. I mean, you can't copyright possessed. Possessed is not a thing that you can argue is only yours. Daemonkin, you can kind of get away with that. The particular way that Games Workshop spells it, I'm pretty sure that it's not just a kind of different approach to how things are done in terms of taking Marines and possessing them, taking Terminators, taking Centurions, turning them into things like Obliterators or Mutilators or possessed Chaos Space Marines. It's not just like a change in the appearance of Chaos and taking it up that extra warp-infused level, but it will also be a way to essentially get around the fact that there are some things that Chaos have access to that you cannot trademark, you can't copyright, you can't do anything like that with. Possessed being a great example. I mean, even things like Obliterator and Mutilator, those probably aren't great words to just slap on your stuff. If you really want to go hardcore into making sure that no one can use your things anymore, changing them to a Daemonkin whatever, I don't know, they'll probably come up with some name for it, that would work pretty well. That is the second part of it. That's the thing that I think is not part of the driving decision, but it works well. You slightly change Chaos up to make things like Possessed and Possession more of a big deal and more of a common occurrence, and so the creation of demon engines and the like is more feasible and something that Chaos makes use of more often than they already did. You also, along with that, get a nice way to ditch the old, frankly, everyday use words and replace them with something that is more easily protectable when it comes to legal stuff. So yeah, that is kind of just a bit of a ramble about the whole Daemonkin thing, really. It looks like something that I'm going to be massively in favour of, depending on what the models look like, of course. Hopefully they are better than the current Possessed models, because those are garbage. But if they're anything like the Obliterator, I'll be happy. And if it is a general shift that they're making for Chaos to kind of increase the prevalence of demonically infused stuff, I'm all on board for that, because as I say, it just increases that nice bit of warp-infused nonsense that separates them from Space Marines as a whole. Let me know what you think of all that in the comments down below, down there somewhere. Feel free in the meantime to click any of the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all of that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.